Just before President Trump took the stage at the Detroit Economic Club today, where he gave a speech touting his economic policies, insisting that affordability was a, quote, fake word invented by Democrats. Quite a message for a speech. There you go. Just before Trump gave that banger of a speech, the New York Times published this. Initial Obamacare enrollment drops by 1.4 million. Now, the word initial is key in there because that number is expected to get worse, not better. You see that 1.4 million number, the number of Americans who made the brutal decision to forego health care coverage after their premium costs skyrocketed, literally doubling on average after Trump and Republicans refused to extend health care subsidies last year. That 1.4 million number is made up of people who are well informed enough to have preemptively opted out of their new higher premiums. Lots of ACA enrollees have plans that automatically renew, and those people have not gotten their first bill yet. They may not know how much higher their new premium is. And when those people get their first bill and the sticker shock hits, which it will, the amount of Americans Trump and Republicans will have effectively just priced out of health insurance is expected to rise. Now, who could have predicted that? Well, just about everyone predicted that. We talked about it a lot on this show. You know why? Because policy experts and Democrats and all sorts of people out there were jumping up and down shouting about it for months last year. But Republicans in Congress allowed health care subsidies to lapse anyway. Now, today, at his speech to the Detroit Economic Club, Trump turned to something else he wants to get rid of, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. As Trump put it today, quote, that jerk will be gone soon. Graceful as always. Now, the Federal Reserve is independent, and Trump can't actually unilaterally get rid of Powell, but the Justice Department has now opened a criminal investigation into Powell, seemingly trying to intimidate him out of the position. All because Trump is upset that Powell is refusing to change interest rates willy-nilly at Trump's command. Again, they're independent. Now, again, we find ourselves in a position where economists and policy experts, leaders on Wall Street, and Democrats, who don't often agree on all that much, are jumping up and down and warning about just how catastrophic for our economy it would be if Trump destroyed the independence of the Fed and politicized interest rates. But Trump seems to be angling for just that. For him, I guess, it's full steam ahead, no matter what. Joining me now to talk about all of this is Senator Elizabeth Warren. She's the ranking Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee. Wow, lots to discuss. First, I mean, I read this headline this morning and about what Jamie Dimon said, and I thought Senator Elizabeth Warren might agree with this. He basically warned that if Trump tries to mess with the independence of the Fed, that would be bad for the economy and bad for people across the country. Why would it be bad?
So
I know why, but you tell us.
Here's why it would be bad. So setting interest rates is a really important thing to do. And there are kind of two ways you could think about how to do that. You could have some people that you do your best to isolate, and boy, they're economists, they're dull, they're nerds. And what they look at is they look at things like what's happening to inflation, what's happening to unemployment, what's happening to GDP growth. And then they say, we think the place to set interest rates is right here. And that's how it works right now with an independent Fed. What Donald Trump wants to do is, frankly, what every president would love to do and say, no. Let's let the president reach in and control interest rates, because as we get into the months before a presidential election, when you've got a president who is in serious trouble on the economy, serious trouble because families are feeling like an economy that's not working for them, that president is going to be so tempted just to dial down those interest rates and flood the economy with money. And just think of it as a sugar high for the economy, right? Businesses do more investing because they have cheap money available. Families do more buying because they've got cheap money available. A good short-term sugar burst, like drinking, 5 of those energy drinks all at once, Red Bull all the way. Long-term consequences for the economy, a total disaster, because it makes inflation go up, it causes prices to go up overall because of the kind of uncertainty if politicians are driving it. So that's what this fight is really about. And Donald Trump has known it since the day he got into office. He said he was going to fire Jerome Powell. Shoot, he'd been in office about an hour and a half. He tried to fire Lisa Cook, another member of the Federal Reserve. He has openly said he will only name a Federal Reserve chair who will do exactly what Donald Trump wants. In other words, a sock puppet. So Donald Trump is trying to get his hands on the control so that he can use interest rates in order to try to persuade people that their economic lives are better than they are. But there's a hard reality out there. And that reality, Jen, is people are very worried about trying to build some economic security. They're worried and they're getting angry at Donald Trump.
We are seeing that around the country, and the sugar high nature and who cares what happens over the long term feels so indicative of his governing. Let me ask you, I can always ask you about a million of things, which is one of the reasons I love talking to you. You are a former law professor. One of the things we started the show just talking about, of course, what's happening in Minneapolis and the resignation today of 6 people from the Civil Rights Division, of 6 people from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota. So many people, a huge percentage of the country has watched these videos and feels horrified and deeply sickened by it. What is the path to accountability? Is there a path to accountability legally for this officer?
Absolutely. Now, look, we fortunately still have good people in Minnesota at the state level. Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, is terrific. And boy, if anyone is going to get in there and get a hold of whatever information he can and pursue justice on behalf of the people of Minnesota, it will be Keith Ellison. And of course, he's backed up by both Governor Walz and by the Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan, who, by the way, is running for Senate. Just terrific, a real fighter for working families, and also somebody who doesn't take corporate PAC money. So you've got a lot of good people who are engaged. So we've got a real possibility of getting some justice at the state level. Also remember, we just keep pushing at the federal level because that's what we have to do. Nationally, show up, peaceful protests, keep this issue alive, keep videotaping and keep showing those videos all across the country to keep pushing back on this administration. And look, right now, we have an ICE that's just out of control. And it is our job, both in the Senate, in the House, but also people all across this country, to push back and say, we got to get some constraints in place.
Yeah. What does that look like to you? I mean, there are some Democrats in both the House and Senate are lobbying for the party to, of course, refuse to fund the government unless Republicans agree to rein ICE's ballooning budget. That's a big amorphous definition. What do you think about that? And how do you think it should be a part of the conversation leading up to the end of January?
So remember, we already have parts of the government now that are going to be funded. But I think, look, we need to focus in particularly on putting some constraints on ICE before you just write them another check for zillions more dollars. But overall, I've been clear from the beginning. It was just like Maxwell Frost just said a minute ago. The Republicans own the House, they own the Senate. If they're going to need some Democratic votes in the Senate, which they will, I've been real clear about what it's going to take to get my vote, and that is lower costs for American families, put some constraints in here on ICE, and show that actually, if we pass this money, you're going to spend it in the ways that Congress has designated. It's pretty straightforward, nothing fancy.
Well, I don't know if they're going to accept all of that, which is why it's important you're going to keep pushing. Senator Elizabeth Warren, thank you for being here as always.
You bet. So good to see you.